Alright, welcome to a new video from SirLucien's gaming channel where we're going to go ahead and create a character. So this video is really kind of pointed at those of you who haven't created one before or are pretty new to the process. And we're going to go ahead and just jump right in and see if we can't create an interesting and fun to play character for an upcoming campaign that I'm going to be playing in. So I hope you enjoy it. Let's get started. Alright, in this video we're going to be going ahead and creating a Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition character for an upcoming campaign a friend of mine is running called Dark Tides. I typically will follow about 10 basic steps to go ahead and complete my character and have it ready for the first play session. So I'm hoping that you can find these steps, tips, and tricks that we go over in this video useful for your campaign or your character creation. For step number 1, you want to go ahead and make sure that you find out what the rules and guidelines your DM or GM, Dungeon Master or Game Master, have for their campaign and have provided to their players. Many times when a Game Master or Dungeon Master creates their campaign, they're trying for a certain feel. Maybe it's located in a certain place or certain type of world, and there are many out there that you can find. It could be anything from something released by Wizards of the Coast, like currently we're playing Storm King's Thunder, or it might be a homebrew that's of the DM or GM's created world. So in this case, my GM went ahead and created a guide for us to take a look at, and I wanted to show you the part where it talks a little bit about creating characters. So he's provided this to all of his characters, and we have the campaign will feature the following game mechanics, so we can see that characters are going to begin at level 1 or 0. It's possible that you may join a campaign where you can create a higher level character, but in this case we're just going to start from scratch and we're going to create a level 1. Character ability stats are determined by rolling standard, set, or customizing variant, and all of those options can be found in the player's handbook. After racial adjustments, no attribute may be below 8. So this is in case you roll really low using this standard set. Then you still have at least an 8. He wants the... typically you would want the party to have a little bit higher scores if they're going to be heroes of their own story. And then third-party content is not allowed. Unearthed Arcana and any Wizards of the Coast published source books are allowed. So we're not allowed to go out and find things from, say, Drive-Thru RPG, where there's a lot of player-made, customizable character classes, but things that came out of the Unearthed Arcana or any other Wizards of the Coast supplement would be allowed in this campaign. And if you have any questions, you can always check with your Dungeon Master. Characters receive the maximum hit points for the first level, and then subsequent levels, players roll for hit points, as we can see here. So what's important about this, and what I wanted to show you mostly for that, is that step 1 is all about finding out what type of campaign you're going to be playing in, making sure that it's something fits in the idea of what you're going to have fun. Is it going to be tactical based? Is it going to be story driven? Is it going to be darker, a lighter toned? Is there more humor to it? Is it more serious? What are some of the overall or overarching themes that'll be in that campaign? And that will help you decide the type of character that you would like to play. This is a crucial step to make sure that you're finding yourself a game that matches and a dungeon master that matches the style that you want to play. The best game that you'll have is one where you can match that style with your idea of what's having fun. All right, for step number 2, what you want to do is go ahead and decide on a concept that sounds appealing to you and sounds fun and would fit in the game. Sometimes you might want to have one or two just in case as you go through the process, or maybe when you're rolling stats or you're looking up information, one of them will kind of speak to you more than the other. One will feel like it's the one that you want to choose, but having a couple options is always good. So in this case, for our example, in the Dark Tides campaign, we are playing a kind of a cross between a mercenary company and also a trading company on like some frontier lands and a lot of coastal trading, things like that. So I want to kind of keep a concept that's going to fit with that. In fact, many of the themes and overtones of the campaign that I'm going to be in have a lot of the Black Company, the book series, as a good reference. So the character concepts I came up with, I have 2 in mind that I'm going to use, and we'll use them as examples as we go through this little training. One being the Hexblade is an option and something that's been interesting to me, which is basically a variant of the Warlock. So it's a certain type of Warlock that is a little bit more fighty, a little bit more up in your face, still has those casting abilities and the dark sinisterness to it, but is using like something like a big sword or a halberd or a spear or some type of weapon to also do damage. I like the idea of that style of character, and I think it would fit with this kind of Black Company-esque Dark Tides campaign. And then the other one I'm leaning towards, and these are really tough to choose from, is basically kind of like a frontline mage, also known as the War Mage. These are 2 classes that Unearthed Arcana put out as variants to the Wizard and the Warlock as far as what type of subclass you can choose once you're in those classes. And these 2 things sounded great to me. Sometimes you do want to talk with your other party members, get an idea of some of the concepts they're coming up with, and that might help you decide so that maybe you're not overstacking the same thing. Like maybe somebody else is going to play a wizard, and if that were true, maybe then I would lean a little bit more towards the Hexblade so that I'm not kind of doubling up. But don't feel constrained. If you really want to play a certain type of character, don't let what the other players are playing kind of change your mind. The best character you're going to have and the most fun you're going to have in a campaign is if you're playing somebody you really chose, you really like to play, and you're excited to play. Don't just settle for, I'll just do whatever the party needs. This is a chance for you to play what you really want. So definitely take that opportunity. So step 3 for me is really we need to roll our stats, because this could inform what type of character we're going to create. And we may have to make adjustments to our concept or even come up with a whole new one if our stats don't quite match what we're trying to do. Now, in this step, I also caution that don't just try to get the min-max type character or the perfect character or just try to build the character that's mathematically correct. Always remember your concept, and always remember that there is a strong role-playing portion to the game, that even if you have a fighter who has a low strength, that can be fun to role play if you're really into it, or you have a mage that's maybe not that smart. Those are still role playing opportunities that may appeal to some people. So don't feel like you have to get the perfect stats, but this may help you inform, or it may help inform you on the choice that you're going to make. So in this case, in our campaign, we're going to be in roll 20. So I'm going to go ahead and bring this up. And I'm going to go ahead and jump in our game real quick, and I will show you that I rolled my stats up previously when the Dungeon Master was online so that he could see the rolls I had. So I did a pretty standard rolling. Here you can see me, and we're doing a 4d6, and we dropped 1, which is a pretty standard way to create characters. A lot of times it will tend to give you a little bit higher average scores, but it doesn't mean that you're always going to get high scores. So in this case, I was able to roll a 13, an 11, an 11, a 17, which is great, a 13, and a 13. These are fantastic stats for a starting character. So this really allows me kind of to do either of the concepts I wish. So I could do my Hexblade with these style of stats, or I could do the War Mage, really putting probably the highest score into my spell casting ability, which will make sure that I'm a strong caster, but then giving me some opportunities for a little bit higher scores in things like having strength or dexterity or constitution. So I have a few bonuses there to make me a little tougher than the average wizard. Alternatively, you have the option to go ahead and under page 12 and 13, where it talks about in the player's handbook how to determine your ability scores, the way that we used was the rolling method, which you can see here. And then they also give you the ability to, instead of rolling, that you can use what is called like the standard array or a standard set. So here you can have a 15, a 14, a 13, a 12, a 10, and an 8, and you're able to use those as your scores. So those are the two ways that you can go ahead and build your ability scores. You will notice that my steps are slightly out of order from the player's handbook. The player handbook will mention that you should choose a race and then a class and then roll your stats. But I like to go ahead and roll my stats to give me an idea and help me think about the concept of my character. And there are many times where I'll roll those stats first before I even kind of fine tune what I would like to play. Sometimes they help me imagine something interesting depending on how they came out. The rolls that I got in this campaign or in this set that I rolled were really high, so it really opens it up and hasn't given me any restrictions to worry about or anything to lean me one way or the other. So far, both of my concepts are good, and we're just going to go ahead and continue on. Next, we have step number 4. And really, you could have 4 and 5 be interchangeable, but this is going to be pick your race, and step number 5 being pick your class, which we'll get to in just a moment, but you could switch them just depending on what your concept was and how solid you are on that part of your character. But let's go ahead and take a look. Now, the standard set of races for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, you can see here, is the Dragonborn, Dwarf, Elf, Gnome, Half-Elf, Half-Orc, Halfling, Human, and Tiefling. And there are variants to some of those. So there's a couple of different Dwarf sub-races you can choose. There's a couple of different Elf sub-races, and so on. So depending on what type of race fits your concept is one way that you could go ahead and choose the race that you will play. Now, sometimes this will be a role-playing decision. This might be a decision based on the type of character that you have in mind to create. Maybe you're creating an elven archer. Maybe you're creating a half-orc warrior. Maybe you're creating all of these kind of standard fantasy tropes. Or maybe you're going to kind of buck the tradition, and maybe you want to do something like a gnome paladin, or you want to do a tiefling cleric, or something like maybe a halfling warrior, barbarian, something like that. So if that's going to fit within your concept, that's one way that you can choose the races. And remember, in this campaign, we also have the ability to choose some of the Unearthed Arcana added in races. So in this case, we could be choosing things like the Eledrian or Gith, or any of these other ones where we can see this race edition. This is going to have some race information. As we keep going through here, we can find a few more. There's some under this article, and so on. So there are a few more options. And Unearthed Arcana is not the only source where we can get things. We can get things from maybe the Sword Coast Adventures book. We can get things from Volo's Guide. So all these other official books released by Wizards of the Coast may have some additional race variants that you can choose from. And you'll want to go ahead and make a choice based on one way to make that choice is based on the role-playing aspect of it or how it fits your concept. Now, you may want to also, if you're a person who wants to take a look and make sure that maybe the race supplements or enhances the class you're going to be playing, then you may want to go ahead and look at what those ability scores are going to give to you. But I definitely don't want you to think that you should only pick a race that gives you bonuses to your class. It's sometimes fun to have the ability to role play something that isn't a trope or isn't a kind of a given, maybe to play against the stereotype of that area. So even though you may want to play a wizard that is a half-orc, even though maybe a half-orc only gets a strength modifier, you see they're a +2, but they really don't have an intelligence buff. That's okay, as long as it fits your role-playing idea and your concept. But you can keep these in mind as you go to try to build your character and make it kind of fine-tune it to be the way you want. So keep this in mind when you're thinking about your class. And in this, for me, there's one other thing that kind of runs into this, is that our game is allowing one of the human variants, which allows you to grab a feat early on as a human. Normally you have to wait for several levels if your game's going to allow feats. And this is going to make a big decision for me, as I think I want some additional ability for one of the characters. So I'm still leaning with a Hexblade and a War Mage. I think my War Mage will probably be a human if I go that route. So as you can see, humans are getting a +1 in everything. Or the variant is that I can get +1 in 2 scores, but I can pick up a feat and I can pick up a skill. So that's a different way to go ahead and do that. Now the Hexblade, I'm probably leaning towards something that isn't one of the standard races. And out of Volo's guide, I was taking a look at maybe the Kenku. I've also seen some other races in like the Genasi from Swords Coast Adventures or Elemental Evil companion guide. So there's a lot of other sources out there, and you can find lists online of all of the accepted characters. In fact, one of the ones that I noticed, let's go and take a look. I believe it was, yeah, this list here, this D&D 5e playable races, which is interesting in the Adventurers League. Although we're not playing in the Adventurers League for this campaign, it still gives me a pretty big list of the different races that are legal and all come from Wizards of the Coast settings or source books. So you can see there's quite a bit. Things like Aarakocra, Isomir, Genasi, Goliath, some of these other things that you might not have seen, kobolds and lizard folk, orcs and tabaxi. So there's a lot there to choose from, and for our Dungeon Master has approved most of these. And there may be one or two that if we say we want to play, like maybe I say I want to play a Warforged, and he might say, that's really not fitting in this campaign, and that's okay. We're just going to go ahead and find something that does fit, and we'll go ahead and create our character. So let's go ahead and choose. This is where it really comes down to, now you have to know what you want to do. Now you have to commit to one of your concepts. So I need to commit in this video, for our example, I really need to commit towards Hexblade or War Mage. And I think for our example, I'm going to go ahead and do War Mage, and then I might, after this whole video is done, go back and redo all these steps and create the Hexblade just because it's fun. So let's continue on. I'm going to continue this example, and let's start thinking about my War Mage as our example and see how we're going to go ahead and choose that. So to continue with our example, I'm going to go ahead and choose Human for my War Mage. And so when we take a look at this, we can see that your ability scores each increase by 1. Or we do have the variant, which isn't listed here, but if we go back to the player's manual, we can see that there is a human variant. So here we are on page 29 of the player's handbook, and we can see the human gives us some information here. It's a broad spectrum of variety and types that there are. Variety in all things, everyone's second best friend, lasting institutions, all kinds of things, ways to get some names at the different types there are. So there are different ethnicities, and although they don't give you any stat increases for the most part, they do give you some ideas to kind of flesh out your character where they might be from. And a lot of these ones are listed from the Forgotten Realms setting, but you can find other name lists like this for if you're playing Greyhawk, or you might be given a list like this from your Dungeon Master if they have a homebrew campaign, that kind of thing. So we are playing in Forgotten Realms world, even though it's a homebrew. And so I'll probably end up picking something from here once I get to that. But really what we want to get to is the traits. And these are the things that we're going to get and need for our character. But here's that variant human trait. So if they allow us, we can go ahead and do this where we get 2 different ability scores of your choice increased by 1. And I gain a proficiency in 1 skill of my choice. And I can gain 1 feat. So I can go ahead and take a look at those feats. But let's get the character sheet going so that I can go ahead and place some of these things in there. And let's bring that back up. And let's go to character sheets. Here we go, is my character sheet. So here's where I'm able to create things. I still need a class. So we know at this point I've made 2 decisions. But we're really kind of on step number 4, which is race. And I'm going to put in here human. And I might put in something like in parentheses the ethnicity of that human once I decide that, along with things like alignment and such. At that point, I can go ahead and assign my scores, and then I can use the +1 bonus. So I know I have a 13, an 11, 11, a 17, and then 2 more 13s. And what I think I'm going to do is I really like the idea of having a pretty high wisdom. or I'm sorry, a pretty high intelligence, which is going to help with my spell casting abilities. But I also want to have high scores in dexterity and constitution so that is a little bit more durable when I'm standing in the front line. So to help with my AC, to help with my hit points, and then help with my attacking, having bonuses in these will be nice. So let's put the stats in as they are at the moment. So if I put in a 17 here, and then I go ahead and put a 13, I definitely want one of my high scores in 13 and 13. So those are 2 of my 13s so far. I'll just mark those off on my piece of paper here. So I still have 1 13 left and 2 11s. So I'm thinking at this point, I think a charisma of 11 is pretty good, or 121, that'd be nice. I think a wisdom of 11 is good, and the other 13 I'm going to do with strength. So I want this character, the image in my head is a tougher human, a tougher man, somebody who can scrap, who can fist fight, can still use weapons, will probably eventually wear some armor, even though starting out I won't be able to have that ability. But I want them to be able to be up in the front line next to the fighters, helping, fighting, adding to our frontline tanks and those guys that are going to be really those absorption of damage. And then I'm going to be right next to them, being able to help them in some ways and helping in the fight, dealing damage and doing things like that. I don't want this to be a stand way in the back kind of damage dealer. I want this to be an upfront kind of guy. So we're gonna put those stats like that. So we went ahead. Now we still have the ability to move 2 of them up by 1 according to our human race variant. And depending on which race you choose, you will be able to go ahead and adjust your stats accordingly. So I think, as you can see, I get a +3. If I move this to the 18, which kind of makes sense, I get my +4, and that's a very strong spell casting thing for my wizard when they're doing DC. I get to add in my bonus, so I'm going to get a nice high bonus. When I'm trying to hit with a spell, I'm going to get that bonus. So that's a pretty important wizard. It doesn't mean you have to have a high intelligence, but if you're going to be a high-end caster and you want to make sure you're hitting with those spells, it's nice to have a higher intelligence. And then I think my other one, I want to go, if I go 14, let's see what we get. We get a +2. So we have the ability to make a bump here on one of my 13s into a +2. So I could get more hit points, which as a mage starting out I'm going to need, or I'm going to try to make it harder for me to hit. As you can see, my armor class goes up a little bit. So I think what I'm going to do is I think I'm going to play around with this, because I think eventually I'm going to get some armor that's going to take my dexterity into account. So like I'll be wearing light armor or maybe possibly a medium armor, and I'm going to get to add this bonus to that armor class, which is going to make me a little harder to hit. And I already have a +1 to hit points, which I think is good. So I think that's where we're going to be. I think that's going to help this class, and I think that's what we're going to do as our race. So I think we finished up on my step number 4. But as you can see, going into step number 5, we've already talked quite a bit about it. So the last couple items we want to make sure that we fill out is our base walking speed. We went ahead and put in 30 for the human. We also can then remember that with this variant, I also get to choose a skill to be proficient in. What I might wait to do is choose that skill after I've seen the skills that I've been given by the wizard, and then I can pick something that is going to benefit me or maybe cover something I didn't get from the wizard area. So let's go ahead and jump over to our next step and take a look at that. Okay, for step number 5, we're going to go ahead and choose our class. So what we want to do is go ahead and bring up our character sheet, and we're going to go ahead and set in wizard. That's going to go ahead and show us some of our saving throw proficiencies are already marked in here. And then we're going to go ahead and be able to choose some more information once we go ahead and take a look at the wizard area. So I'm going to bring up our player's handbook again, and let's go ahead and go down to wizard. Okay, here we are on page, I believe it is 112. Yeah. The PDF I'm using is a little blurry, so that I don't have a way to show you my actual player's handbook, but I believe it's 112. In the PDF, it's 106, but I think that's 112. And so, let's look up here. Yeah, I think it is. So here's our wizard, talks about Scholars of the Arcane. It gives us a nice chart to understand what we're getting. So at level 1, we get a +2 proficiency bonus. We can see that we're going to gain the features of spellcasting and arcane recovery. It's going to tell us how many spells we know. Cantrips are known 3, and how many first level spells we're going to get, and so on. And each class that you go ahead and choose is going to have something similar as far as what its level is, what proficiency bonus you're at, what features you gain with that. Some will have spells, but some will have other types of abilities. And in this case, we're creating a level 1 character, so we're only going to concern ourselves with the early parts of this class. We're not sure how high a level this character is going to get. We're not really sure how far this campaign will go. So I'm not going to make my choices or decisions based on getting, my signature spell at level 20. I may never actually get there. It's something that you may want to ask your dungeon master to get a good idea of how long and how far this campaign will go, to give you an idea if the class you wanted to play actually fits the level of the campaign. As an example, if I were to talk to my dungeon master and they said, we're probably going to play, it's a short to medium-ish campaign, we might get into the 3rd and 4th, maybe 5th level, well, then I want to make sure that these is giving me the skills and the things that fit my character concept by the time I'm at 4th or 5th level. If my character concept doesn't really come into its own until 6th, 7th, 8th, or 9th, I may want to rethink what I was going to play, because I may not actually get to any of those ideas. So just keep that in mind when you're choosing your class. I know for our example, we have chosen the War Mage, and so we're trying to make a little bit more durable wizard. We're trying to make a little bit more frontline wizard, somebody that can fight with weapons and armor eventually. But for now, we're going to start out as a first level wizard to get our spellcasting abilities. So here we are. So we get hit dice, 1d6 per wizard level. Our hit points basically starts at 6, and then we get to add in our constitution modifier. So not very many hit points at level 1. That's going to be an issue to start with. Hit points at higher levels, as you can see, we can roll them. We have proficiencies for armor, none at the moment, weapons, tools, saving throws, and I get to choose some skills. So let's go ahead and bring our character sheet up again, and let's fill out some of this stuff to show you a little bit where it's at. Now, each character sheet can be different. You may have to find where that information is. In this case, we're using the standard character sheet in Roll20, which is where we'll be playing our campaign. So we're going to have... we noticed that we had hit points were going to be 6 plus my constitution modifier. So this is a +1. So I'm going to get 7 total hit points to start with. And that's also going to be my maximum. So I'm going to go ahead and put maximum there so that as these go down, I always know what I can go back up to. I have 1 hit dice, as you can see here. And that's we could see that from our class. And it's going to be a 1d6 type of hit dice. I get 1 of them, and it's a 1d6 type. So now we get some proficiencies, so we can say nothing for armor, but I do have weapon proficiencies of dagger, darts, slings, quarterstaffs, and light crossbows. I could write that in, or I could just remember it. Tools, no proficiencies off hand or to start with. Saving throws is intelligence and wisdom. So if I look at my character sheet for this example, you can see that I have a check mark in wisdom and intelligence. What that means is not only do I get the bonus from the actual ability, I get an extra +2 bonus for proficiency. So as you can see, a 6 for +2, and my wisdom, which was a 0 +2, so I get a 6 and a 2 when I make those saving throws. So that's pretty good. Continuing on, we have choose 2 from this list. So I have Arcana, History, Insight, Investigation, Medicine, and Religion. I get to choose 2, so I'm thinking Arcana checks and probably insight checks are pretty good, but I get 3 of them. So I could go with something for history, if mine was more of a book learning kind of mage or wizard, but we want mine to be more of a frontline wizard. So I think what I'm going to do is I think Arcana is good so that I can maybe get an understanding of the type of magics that are being used against our company, or what type of magic might be in our way, or types of magic we're encountering. Insight is about reading a person I don't know if that's going to be as big for me. That there may be other characters that have a better ability for that, but it's not bad to have. It's just somebody's maybe lying to you or hiding something from you or being truthful for you. Insight can be a lot of things like that. Investigation is, I like the idea because we're going to use it in such ways when we're exploring something or looking for some clues or things like that. And I definitely want my character to be able to participate in that. So I'm thinking Arcana and Investigation are going to be the two I choose for my my class. So what I can do is I can come in here and I can say for Arcana, I go ahead and put a check mark because I've chosen it. And I'm going to go ahead and check Investigation. And these are good ones for me. So you see they went up to a 6. So that's really good for me. I think the other one, because I can pick any other skill because I'm human, I think the other one I really want, and it doesn't have to be the wizard. I could go with something else in this case. But I think what I'm going to do, not history, it's not a book learning wizard. This is a hands-on wizard. This is an in-the-field wizard. So I think maybe a perception check would fit. Yeah, I think perception check would fit for this person. I want them to be keen-eyed. I want them to notice things that are happening. I want them to have a chance to have good initiatives and things like that. So I think that's what I'm going to do. I think I'm going to go with a perception. So that's the other skill I'm going to take. So I get the 3 because of my race and my class. Other than that, you do get some starting equipment with your class. So I can choose either a quarterstaff or a dagger. For my War Mage, I definitely want to go staff. So in this case, we'll go ahead and place in an item. Now with Roll20, it's nice. Let me open this up a little bit. What we're going to do is we're going to open a space to put an item. And then let's move this a little. Oh, actually, I don't need my character sheet bigger. What I need is my compendium. Here we go. And we can say quarterstaff, I believe. There it is. So I can just drag this onto my character sheet. And it's going to add it to my inventory. And it gave me, if I was use this as an attack, which I hope to do, you can see it already put in the attack. If you have a regular character sheet where you're going to write that down, what you would do is you would look up the information for quarterstaff, and you would write down that it does 1d6 damage. It's a bludgeoning type weapon. It's a melee. It is versatile, so it does have the versatile property. Secondary damage is 1d8, so it means I can use it as a one-handed or a two-handed. So when I use it two-handed, it's 1d8, and when I use it one-handed, it's 1d6, and you can see the weight of it as far as encumbrance. So you can see that. So here we have the 1d6 one-handed, and actually I'll probably have a secondary one that I'll create that'll be the two-handed version of it. If you ever want to know what those are, you can look that up in the player's handbook, but you can also look it up in a compendium or online if I want to know what versatile is. So I can say, I can just type in a little bit here, let's see if we can get to, there we are, weapons versatile. So you can see here, this weapon can be used with one or two hands. A damage value in parentheses appears with the property. The damage when the weapon is used with two hands to make a melee attack. All right, so that's pretty good. What's the other thing I can choose? I can choose a component, a pouch, or an arcane focus. I like the idea for my character to be, in this case, an arcane focus. Now, you can look up these specific things for the different classes, and you're going to have to research which class you're creating. This guide's going to be very good for the example I'm using, where we're kind of deep diving into the wizard class a little bit as my example. But really, all of this information is in the player handbook, and you can just walk through it with no matter what class you choose as you go through. So I'm going to choose Arcane Focus after I've done some research, and you can make your choice depending on if you think a component pouch is better or an Arcane Focus. I'm going to do my Arcane Focus, so I'm just going to add, let's see if that's something I can just add from Arcane. Do they list like Arcane Focus as something? If not, I'll just go ahead and put it in here, and I'll just say Arcane Focus. So Arcane Oh, actually, that's not what I want. These are racial abilities or other features and traits. This is going to be more equipment, so I'm just going to put in here arcane focus. And I could look that up in the equipment area and put a weight at some point also. Okay, and as part of my character, probably what I would end up doing is once I start to write the character background, I'd probably put that in my bio area where I can explain why I have it at focus, what it is, how I got it, those kinds of things. And it adds just flavor to the character. All right, so finishing up our example here, I also get a Scholar's Pack or an Explorer's Pack and a spell book. So I think what we're going to do is, I think, again, Explorer's Pack is definitely more what this character's about. So I'm thinking Explorer. Yep, Explorer's Pack. So it puts that in there, and it has a bunch of things that come inside of it. So if you, it's got like the bedroll, mess kit, tinderbox, torches, rations, water skin, and rope, as you can see there. So it comes with a bunch of things. And the last thing was spell book. Let's see if that's actually just an item. There it is, spell book. And I can go ahead and list that in there. I'm surprised arcane focus isn't in there. What if I did focus? Nope. Must not be listed. That's okay. You can write it in just like I did. All right, so this character class requires that I go ahead and take a look at cantrips and such. And I could go ahead and put those in. So as you can see, I know 3 of them from my wizard's list, and I get to pick some spells. So instead of doing that in this kind of guide to creating a character, I'm just going to go ahead and do that real quick and complete that. Typically, you would want to complete the rest of the features of your class and go ahead and put them in your character sheet. And that would end our step number 5. So step number 4 and 5 you kind of do together. They can be interchangeable. It might be that you want to choose your class first, then your race, or you can choose your race, then your class. It's just up to you how you want to do that. You're going to research it through your player's handbook or whatever resource you're getting the information from. Make your decisions. Hopefully it fits the concept you have in your head, and you're ready to move on. Okay, for step number 6, we're going to go ahead and talk about choosing our spells. Now, normally you would spend time reading through all the different spells you would have options to. I went ahead and did that offline so I could go ahead and already choose mine. So let me just show you what I have done. A lot of times when you're choosing your spells, you're going to follow your class guidelines, and you're going to want to make sure that you choose the spells that kind of fit the concept of the character you want to play, but try to give yourself a little bit of variety and a little bit of utility. It wouldn't make sense to try to take all of the cantrips that are damage cantrips, so like firebolts and eldritch blasts and all these other different ones, when really you can only fire one of those in a round at a time anyway. So the idea would be is that you want to pick 1 or 2 of those that are going to fit the template or the idea or the mold or the kind of the what you have in mind for your character. So as an example, we've been using the wizard, which is going to be a War Mage, and let me show you how I chose these spells. So I get 3 cantrips starting at first level wizard, and I went ahead and chose Blade Ward, Firebolt, and Minor Illusion. So the idea behind my cantrips here is I only get 3, so I got to be a little careful. I will eventually get more so I can expand that list, but I had to choose the ones that made me feel like the War Mage early on. Blade Ward is going to allow me to cast a spell that will last for one of my rounds that will give me resistance to bludgeoning, slashing, and piercing damage. So this War Mage is meant to be up in the front line. This War Mage is also meant to go after casters in the back or go around the main tank and find those other targets that need to be dealt with, but I'm going to be doing it up close. So there's the chance that I could get hit while I'm either maneuvering to get to those places, while I'm fighting the person that I'm supposed to be tying down, and I need a way to mitigate that. Remember that this is not a wizard that is going to be a long-range blasting wizard or shooting wizard or artillery wizard. And if that were the case, I probably would have chosen a different spell set. So you got to keep that in mind when you're talking or thinking about choosing your spells for the class and the idea that you're going to use. Firebolt gives me an ability to fire off a cantrip as I'm moving in. It's got nice range, it's got decent damage, it scales with level, and it's kind of just fits the idea of giving me something that I can do if I'm not in melee range, which will happen as I begin to maneuver to try to get around the front line to where the types of targets I'm looking for are going to be. I might go after archers in the back, I might go after mages and clerics in the back. The big frontline heavy hitters, I'm going to let my frontline heavy hitters take them on. So I'm trying to try not to tangle with them. I might go after a rogue at some point where I can track them down and lock them down somehow. So I got to be a little careful. And Firebolt's going to give me that ability to hit on the run and while I'm maneuvering into position so that I can start attacking from the melee position. Minor Illusion I chose because I wanted one utility cantrip that I could cast quite a bit. There's lots of uses for being able to create either sounds or images that can fit in any RP moment during all of those times that there's not combat, and even sometimes in combat this can be used to great effect. I like spells like this because they use your imagination, and the better your imagination, the more creative you get, the more powerful a spell like this can be. Then I get to pick from the wizard. I get 6 first level spells to write inside my book. Now this is going to be different depending on what class you are taking. Sorcerers are going to have a different type of list. Warlocks have a different type of list. Bards, clerics, and all of that. And you're going to want to follow your class restrictions or guidelines for all of the types of spells you can have memorized, known, those kinds of things. Just for our example, and to show you how I'm rounding out this idea of the War Wizard. So the big thing that makes this work at the moment is going to be the Mage Armor spell, which allows me to get to a higher AC, and then the Shield spell, which when I do get hit or when something's about to hit me, I have the ability to burn off one of those to hopefully make it so that I'm not hit. The downside of the War Mage starting early and even later on is going to be my low hit point pool. So the only thing I can do to mitigate that is try to make it harder for me to be hit while I'm in melee range. These are the things that are going to help me with that. So I chose Shield and Mage Armor are the 2 main spells that I'm going to use in conjunction. Now, I only have 2 spell slots, so even though I can prepare 3 of the 6 spells I've taken, I'm only going to be able to cast 2 of them at any given time before a long rest. So these are things I have to keep in mind. So in my concept, I'm thinking about how my round starts, how combat starts, what are the orders of things I need to do, what are the spells that are going to help me do that, and then I still have a few other spells that I can always learn or use or come up with if we have the time for me to prepare them or memorize them so that they're ready for something else. The last spell I prepared out of the ones I've chosen is Sleep, because that's just a good all-around AoE kind of spell. I like the idea that it's an automatic hit. I like the idea that it's based off of, there's no actual save. It's just based on the hit dice the dice that I roll versus the hit points of the creatures that are out there. So this can be a nice locking down effect. Somebody tries to run away from me, I can fire off the Sleep. Maybe there's not wizards in the group that we're fighting, so my intended role isn't necessarily needed as much. I can then turn and I can become more of a area control, crowd control, creature control character at that time. Now I did choose Expeditious Retreat, Grease, and Color Spray. All of these are utility spells that could come useful in certain instances. If I think that I might need them, I could probably switch out maybe a Sleep, but I'm always going to need my Mage Armor and my Shield. Eventually, when I go up in levels, I'll be able to prepare more, have more prepared, and I'll have more slots to cast those, and more of these spells will come into effect. Expeditious Retreat gives me a ton of mobility if I need to run somebody down or maneuver in the battlefield, which eventually I'm going to need to because I need to get to those people that are staying in the back. Grease is one of those things that is a nice utility spell to help if there's a confined area. It works for area control. It can help some of your characters if they have a lot of characters around them. You can use this to try to help them or alleviate some of the pressure on them, those kinds of things. Same thing with Color Spray. Color Spray works very much like Sleep and does a few other things, but is a big dice roll, automatic hit kind of spell. So as you can see, this is the theme of the War Mage, which is get into melee range of those soft targets and beat them down. So these things are going to hopefully help me do that. All right. So typically with choosing your spells, you're going to have to take a look at the ones you want. Be careful not to get, like paralysis by choice or having too much choice. That's always what happens. Trying to choose spells can take up a lot of time. Stick with your theme. Keep it in mind. When you're thinking of your spells, think about how you're going to use them in combat and out of combat. Make sure you have at least one or two for out of combat. Make sure you have several for in combat, so you have a good mixture where you can. Okay? So that's all we're going to cover on picking your spells. We're going to go ahead and move on to the next step. Okay, for step number 7, we're going to go ahead and pick our background. Now, our backgrounds are going to give us several additional skills, can give us additional equipment, could give us money. There's a lot of things, even times some type of special trait or ability, and we're going to go ahead and see those. So I'm going to go ahead and pick my background, and we're going to see that, and it's also going to help with traits, ideals, bonds, and flaws, and things like that also. So when you're looking for those, let me show you. The one I'm actually going to be choosing is coming from inside our campaign guide, because our Dungeon Master set up a couple of ones that are relevant to the campaign, and I'm going to go ahead and choose this. So I'm going to choose the Arcanist, but I'm going to choose the variant that's the Emerald Wizard, and it's going to be basically a secret group of unlawful spellcasters exist. They strive to oppose the unfair Omnian arcane system. They occasionally orchestrate random disasters to befall their most hated of the corrupt houses. So what we're going to get from that is we're going to get investigation, skill proficiency. We're going to +1 intelligence skill of my choice. And I'm also going to get 2 languages. So I'll probably choose common and something else. And then I'm going to get some common clothes, a badge signifying my legal arcane status, and a pouch containing 15 gold. So I get those with that. So one of the things you can take a look at, though, is let's take a look at some of the more standard backgrounds that you will find in the Player's Handbook. Okay, starting on page 126, you get to your backgrounds, and as you can see, there are ways to customize those. And just to give you an idea, we have something like Alkalite, we have Charlatan, we have Criminal, as you can see here, and there's lots of things that talk about what you get as far as, like, if we look at Entertainer, we would get Acrobatics and Performance as a proficiency. We'd get some toolkits here, a disguise kit, and a musical instrument. And then we even get some more equipment, musical instrument. We get a favorite admirer, love letter, lock of hair, or trinket, a costume, a belt pouch containing 15 gold pieces. And then there's even some further things about what type of entertainer I might be. And then there's also some features that might go with that. Then it will talk about things like suggested characteristics, although you can make these up on your own, but you can also roll these or choose one that kind of seems to fit the idea of your character. And you can find a bunch of these in the Player's Handbook. So for mine, we're going to go ahead and choose, I believe, use the table for Sage or Spy background in the Player's Handbook as a basis for my trait. So I'm going to use Spy or Sage. So let's take a look at that for our example and see how that can fit our War Mage who's trying to hide his power, right? Because in arcane magic is outlawed. And so you have to have permission to use it. And so my guy is more of a pretending he has the permission to do it. In reality, he's one of these secret organization wizards that tries to hide that. So let's take a look. I'm betting I choose stuff from, probably, I bet it's probably spy instead of sage, but let's take a look at it. So if we go and find folk hero, guild artisan, where is artisan, hermit? These should be alphabetical, I believe. So there's noble. So just some extra ones that you can find. So here's sage. So I could pick up when it talked about, I've already got this piece. That came from the piece in the campaign guide. But what he's referring to is this area here. Personality traits, ideals, and bonds. He may allow this portion. So when you attempt to learn or recall a piece of lore, if you don't know that information, you often know where or whom. This is kind of like an RP hook that a DM can use. It's kind of like covers you having contacts in the world in some way, people that you can go to for certain things. But then there's also spy, which I kind of like better for my, because I was thinking actually soldier was one way I was going to go, even though he's a wizard. There's urchin. Oh, did I miss spy? Soldier. So that's a variant, and it is off of criminal. So really I could use the criminal contacts. So I might choose something like this. I always have a plan for what to do when things go wrong. Does that fit my character? I'm always calm no matter what the situation. I never raise my voice or let my emotions control me. I kind of like that, a very controlled person. First thing I do in a new place is note the locations of valuables. Not really fitting with my War Mage there. I would rather make a new friend than a new enemy. Incredibly slow to trust. That could be pretty good for my War Mage. Those who seem to fairest often have the most to hide. I don't pay attention to risks in a situation. Never tell me the odds. I always like those kinds of ones. Best way to get me to do something is to tell me I can't do it. I blow up at the slightest insult, so I'm pretty touchy. I have a soft, or what would they call soft skin, weak skin, thin-skinned, I guess would be the. So I think out of all of it, I like the idea that I'm incredibly slow to trust. Those who seem the fairest often have the most to hide. Or I like the idea that it's a very controlled person. This guy has to be controlled, can't be fearful. He's putting himself in a dangerous position, especially with such low hit points. I like the idea of this. So I like personality trait being I'm always calm. Can I? Nope. All right, so I'm going to have to type that into my character. So let's put that in our character sheet. I'm going to go ahead and move this off of the screen so we can get to my personality trait right here. And we're going to go ahead and type that in. So I am always calm, no matter what the situation. I never raise my voice. So I got to remember this while I'm role playing, because these are giving me role play cues. Or let my emotions control me. So I like that. Oh, spelled emotions wrong. All right. So at that point, those are personality traits. Then we go up to ideals. So I have the choice of honor, freedom, charity, greed, people, or redemption. I like freedom. Chains are meant to be broken, as are those who would forge them. And these ideals have a lean towards either lawful, chaotic, good, evil, neutral, or good. I like people. I'm loyal to my friends, not to any ideals, and everyone else can take a trip down the sticks for all I care. So it's the idea that my loyalty is with the company. My loyalty doesn't lie outside of that. It's a little bit more ambiguous. It means that I probably wouldn't normally stick my neck out for somebody else other than people within the company. That kind of sounds, I like that one, or freedom. The chains are meant to be broken, as are those who would forge them, chaotic. The idea that you can't bind me, your laws don't restrict me and shouldn't restrict people. So either freedom or people. I think I'm going to go with people because I think that fits really well with this campaign I'm in. And you're definitely going to want to choose the one that fits your character concept. So I'm loyal. So I'm loyal to my friends. Not to any ideals. So I'm not a goody two-shoe. And everyone else can take a trip down the sticks for all I care. Okay, there we go. Oh, loyal to my friends. There we go. Perfect. Let's check out my bonds. I'm trying to pay off an old debt I owe to a generous benefactor. My ill-gotten gains go to support my family. Something important was taken from me and I aim to steal it back. I will become the greatest thief that ever lived. I'm guilty of a terrible crime. I hope I can redeem myself for it. Someone I love died because of a mistake I made. That will never happen again. I like that. I like that idea. I think that's the 6th option of bond. I'm going to take that. So someone, and what I can do is I can put this into my backstory, or we can work with the Dungeon Master to kind of work this into the game at some point. And my idea is this is probably why this character is not your typical wizard. I made a mistake, and now I throw myself into dangerous situations head on. I get up and close. I don't just sit back because I'll never make that mistake again. That will never happen again. So maybe it was something like that. That will never happen again. Like maybe I meant to do something and it missed and hit somebody else. I was too far away. I wasn't close enough. I was reckless. It was a bad decision. And so as a wizard, that formed my attitude, that formed my character, it formed my ideals and creeds into being sure I can hit what I aim at, being up close so that there can't be others that get in the way. And I think that kind of fits with this War Mage who's in the front lines instead of being your typical mage who might be in the back. So I think that's good. Does it give us any flaws? All right, flaws. When I see something valuable, I can't think about anything but how to steal it. When faced with the choice between money and my friends, I usually choose the money. If there's a plan, I'll forget it. If I don't forget it, I'll ignore it. That could be a pretty good one. If I have a tell... Oh, I have a tell that reveals when I'm lying. That could be a good one. I turn tail and run when things look bad. An innocent person is in prison for a crime that I committed, but I'm okay with that. So these are a flaw. These are things that make that my character's not necessarily all great. There's, I like the idea that I have a tell that reveals when I'm lying. So I'm not a good liar, which kind of fits because I don't have a really good charisma. I think this character is more of a in-your-face kind of character. It's not trying to be beguiling. Yeah, I think that's what I'm going to go with. I have a tell that reveals when I am lying. And maybe that makes it easier, or it would probably make it harder for me to deceive, or it will give somebody a bonus maybe to their insight if my Dungeon Master happens to see that. And we can always come up with some funny or cool way that what's the tell for when this happens. So there we go. We've got the background, brings in those items, and that really kind of leads us on to our next step, and we're getting pretty close. Almost finished with our 10 steps of building a character. So let's continue on. All right, and moving on to step number 8, you want to go ahead and pick any additional equipment. You can find that starting in the player's handbook on page 143. You can use the money that you got from your background and go ahead and choose any additional equipment. Make sure you run by any of those purchases by your Dungeon Master to make sure those are things that you can purchase in that campaign. With this wizard example, we really don't have too much more to do equipment-wise, so I just went ahead and put on the pouch the common clothes that I got from my background, my 15 gold, and I'm going to go ahead and save that. I'm just going to work with the things that I have at the moment. And eventually, if I need more stuff, I'll buy it in-game and as we roleplay. So that is typically buying your additional equipment that you didn't get from your class and your background. And just one other thing you might want to do is think about, keep in mind your alignment, because you're going to want to choose that at some point, and put in your proficiencies that we might have missed from the earlier steps. But step number 8 is just go ahead and choose your equipment. Now, on a fighter or a more martial type character, you'll probably spend a little more time here. Maybe a cleric type character, maybe a ranger type character, those kinds. The ones that where you get very little money at the end, you're probably pretty close to being done at this point. So moving on. Step number 9 is, one of the things that I like to do is go ahead and search for some character art. So there's going to be a lot out there. I like to use Google, I like to search, and I like to look through places like DeviantArt or, you know, all the different images, Pinterest, those kinds of places, to really help get this idea of what my War Mage in my head is thinking or looking like, and then be able to present that as a picture to the players and the Dungeon Master to help them visualize the character I have in my head. If you can get one that's commissioned by an artist, I definitely recommend that. There's many artists out there willing to create a character in the image that you want. If you're going to use images that are out there and you're going to be using them in online games or things like that, you might want to make sure that you mention who the artist is or even ask for permission. In a home game, that's not as big a deal. I only mention it because I do a lot of streaming and recording of our games online, so you just want to be a little careful there. And the other thing that this can help with too is if you provide this to your Dungeon Master, a lot of times they can make the token that they're going to need if they're playing online, or you can start looking for a miniature and maybe paint up a miniature that you're going to use if you're out in a tabletop game. So hopefully that helps you out. And then we can round it out with our last step, which is write a backstory. I'm not going to really teach anybody how to write backstories, but what you want to do is on your character sheet, a lot of times there's always a bio area, and you want to fill out the things that are like your character appearances, allies and organizations, character backstory, or even use the bio and info area in Roll20, or if you're using some other program, to really fill that out. Leave lots of mystery, leave lots of openings, but also fill in some details that allow your Dungeon Master to take a look at that and maybe incorporate some of that information into the campaign. Anything that can tie you in personally, where your character in personally to the world that you're going to be adventuring in, will make it that much more fun of a game. So don't ever underestimate how much adding a bio to your character can be. Take a little time at it, come up with this character's ideas. You're going to be playing this person, you're going to be embodying their thoughts and beliefs and hopes and dreams, and you really want to try to play that true and not really just play yourself, although there's nothing wrong with that, but this is your opportunity to try to play somebody different or see it from a different perspective or try to understand it from a different perspective. So there's a lot of power in being able to play a character in a game like this. So those are my 10 steps to building a character class. I hope that you enjoyed this. I hope that these will work no matter what character class you're building. My example was a wizard, but you could use it for any type of class you're going to be coming up with. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you have fun. I hope you come back to the channel and check out more of our content. Hopefully, we'll see you in the next one. Thank you for joining. Bye-bye.